empty-sized log, and she was able to finally sit back and relax. The setting sun had long ago split the grey sky with hues of orange and red that rippled and glowed through the twilight, stretching the horizon. The clearing mist gave form to the dozen or so boats in the distance that had anchored for the night or waited for their spot in the harbour. It was a scene she was familiar with, the coastline twinkling with the lights and shadows of ships and trawlers from Aberdeen to Fraserburgh and beyond. The repetitive crunch of sand nearby caught her attention. The wind took the sound away for a moment, but when she heard it again it was closer and seemed to be speeding up. Georgia stepped from her shelter and rounded the dune as a girl came into view, her arms and legs pumping furiously as she sprinted as if being chased. Georgia flinched as she eventually stumbled to a stop 30 metres or so away and doubled over, one arm across her stomach, the other propped against her knee. She couldn't tell if the girl was about to be sick or was trying to catch her breath. The heaving sobs drifting her way answered the question. The girl stood upright, closed her eyes, and turned towards the crashing surf. With her head tilted to the brooding sky, she let out a strangled scream. It tore the air with anger and desperation. Georgia took a few steps towards the girl as she screamed again, consumed with a need to console her. But she held back from calling out, unsure whether to intrude on the moment, and feeling awkward that the other girl was unaware of her presence. Trepidation fluttered in her stomach as the stranger began kicking at pebbles and seaweed, inching her way towards the water. Whitewash lapped the toes of her trainers before fully encasing her feet to her ankles. As the frigid water began to hit her shins, she strode more determinedly, as if the icy onslaught wasn't even registering, slapping her hands against the incoming waves and shouting unintelligibly at the moon. What the hell is she doing? Georgia's reticence disappeared as she picked up her pace, cupped her hands around her mouth, and shouted, "Hey!" The stranger stumbled as the water swept around her upper thighs, and Georgia broke into a run, panic building along with her heart rate as she tried to fathom the girl's intentions. "Stop!" she called out again. "What the hell are you doing? Get out of the water!" The girl twisted around, clearly startled by Georgia's presence, and lost her footing again as another wave broke. The water fully engulfed her as she fell, sucking her further out to sea. She cried out and began to choke on the salty onslaught. "Fuck!" Georgia tore off her jacket and jumper as she ran. She braced against the shock of cold, and her breath came rapidly through gritted teeth as her legs smashed through the surf between them. She tried to time the waves, planting her feet as each one thumped against her in an attempt to stay upright for as long as possible. Her progress was steady, but it didn't feel quick enough, as her determined stare stayed pinned on the girl, who continued to thrash and claw at the air in a futile attempt to find some sort of firm footing. Georgia cried out when the girl's head went under, and only hesitated a moment before she dived forward below the next wave, aiming for the same spot. The salt stung her eyes, and there was no visibility. Georgia surfaced and sucked in a gulp of air before diving straight back down again, her hands searching blindly until finally they grabbed hold of the girl. Georgia yanked them both to the surface, twisted the girl's jumper in her fist, and thrust them towards the shore as the girl flailed and choked. Her feet eventually found the seabed, and she was able to hook the girl under the arms before half lifting, half dragging her mercilessly beyond the sea's grasp. They fell back on the sand in a tangle of leaden limbs, breathless and soaked. Georgia was the first to recover. "Shit! Are you okay?" She sat up and reached out a hand to pull the girl up beside her, but she scrambled away, still heaving for breath and spitting out water. Georgia frowned and rubbed furiously at her arms as a mixture of cold and shock prickled them with goosebumps. "What the hell were you doing going in the water on a night like this?" The girl looked to be younger than Georgia, maybe 18 or 19, with long blonde hair now drenched and caked in sand. Her pale skin was blotched from crying, and her lips had taken on a worrying tinge of blue. A baseball cap hung from her ponytail, and she fumbled to get it back on her head, pulled it lower over her brow, and waved dismissively in Georgia's general direction as she shuffled.